Have you heard the saying, cash is king? What do you think? Is it? Of course it is. But understanding the camouflage holes to how we look at cash flow is essential. We can sometimes make some pretty bad decisions because cash flow can also be misleading in a healthcare private practice. Hi, I'm Brandon Segal. I'm a private practice industry expert, and I'm here today to show you the ins, the outs, and how to break down your cash flow, and ensuring you don't fall into those hidden traps I alluded to earlier. So let's start with understanding what statement you utilize to measure cash flow. Traditionally, you will utilize what's called a profit and loss statement on a cash basis to measure cash flow. Some practices, though, will generate their own cash flow statement, which is basically a financial statement that summarizes the amount of cash and cash equivalents entering and leaving a company in a given period of time. So the cash flow statement measures how well a company manages its cash position, meaning how well the company generates cash to pay its debt obligations and fund its operating expenses. Now, traditionally, a cash flow statement is challenging to show from a positive perspective for healthcare private practices, unless you are either at scale, meaning you reached optimum growth and you've got the numbers behind you from a revenue perspective, or you have larger profit margins than most. Now, I'm typically seeing in healthcare 1 to 20% in terms of our margin. With scale, sometimes it's less. As an aside, or FYI, traditionally when you file your taxes, they look at everything through the lens of a profit and loss statement on a cash basis accounting structure. Basically, cash received versus cash paid out for a period of time. However, I want to warn you, from a strategic standpoint, I like what's called an accrual basis accounting system. And so I just want you to be aware, and the reason why I like accrual basis is because I find cash flow can be misleading in healthcare. An example of this is that your first quarter and second quarter of 2020 might be misleading because you had a high amount of cash flow due to collections related to claims from the end of 2019 into the beginning of 2020. For example, one of my practices had its best January, its best February, and even its best March from a productivity level. So guess what? April, May, June were really great, and we got our PPP at the very end. So actually, our third quarter even looked decent. It's not until now, the fourth quarter, where we're really feeling the pandemic. Another thing to keep in mind related to cash flow is that your cash flow typically lags after a productivity. So you can have a high producing month in which your cash flow is awful because it might take 30, 60, 90 days before that productivity pays off. Meanwhile, if you're like me where you pay variable costs in most circumstances, we pay a lot on those bigger months. And so there's a lag in that cash flow. And then you may have a low month because you didn't do so much productivity and your expenses were down. But guess what? You collected all that money from previous months. So it's just important to keep in mind the lens of what we look at your cash flow. Now, here are 3 strategies to optimizing that cash flow statement. 1, I recommend at least 6 months of cash flow if possible. 2, I want you to align your productivity with measuring cash flow on a regular basis. And 3, I want you to do financial modeling for the next 12 months, understanding your productivity, measuring your cash flow, measuring profitability, all things that are important. Okay, if this is something you struggle with, I want you to sign up for a free 30-minute complimentary strategy session. My name is Brandon Segal. I'm the president of Wellness Works Management Partners. I spend day in and day out coaching, consulting, and partnering with private practices just like you I'm on a mission to change the world one private practice at a time. Let's unlock your bottom line and let's get your cash flow, your metrics, and your accrual basis strategy all set up so you're ready to take advantage of 2021.